So, all right, we'll get started again. That will give you guys a little bit more time to play around with some of the other things that we're doing. So as chapter 1 gets started, I doubt you guys have had a chance to read it.
No.
No? So
since you just published it just now.
Since I just published it right now, yeah. But it's probably the first couple chapters are going to be the most important chapters that you can read. Chapter 1 goes into what is economics. And let me just bring a few of these up on my computer so I don't misstate anything. So basically what economics is it's how individuals make determinations on goods and services depending on their scarcity, okay? So what is scarcity? Well, scarcity is basically the need for goods and services above the price of zero. All right, so anything that you have to trade to get a good and service has some scarcity to it. If say that, you know, if Lexus GX 460s cost a penny, the scarcity would be very low on that. It would still have a penny's worth, but they don't cost a penny, so they've got a much higher cost. So what scarcity is then is just the level at which goods and services have a value. And it's also called utility, which we're going to get into on Wednesday. So pretty much everything has a scarcity to it. What is something that you guys would guess doesn't have a scarcity? What's something that's free? Completely free.
Oxygen. Yeah.
So
yeah, I thought the same thing.
Now, to an extent it is, right? For us right now, this second, oxygen's free. But think about like China or where they have major pollution, Los Angeles. Okay, if you own a car in Los Angeles, chances are you have to have a certain type of car, at least within the next few years. You're gonna have to have a certain type of car. You have to buy a certain type of gasoline. If you're a manufacturer, you have to have certain types of pollution controls on your plants and things like that. So there is a cost to the pollution that goes into the air. So there's a cost to the quality of air that you breathe, okay? Think about it this way. If you guys live next to like a chemical plant or something like that, and you were always, you know, feeling headaches and gasping for breath, you would probably file a lawsuit or something against that chemical company to get the oxygen quality changed in your surrounding area. So yeah, oxygen for most of us most of the time is free, but it's not always free, okay? What else would you think of as free?
Well, we can't say water because that can be scarcity depending on where you are.
Yeah, so water, we already know that water is going to have a scarcity. Now, luckily living in Fort Collins, you guys have probably the best water in the United States. That's why you have a brewery here, why a lot of breweries locate here is because of the quality of water.
And in Golden too.
In Golden too, yeah. Why is the water quality so high in these areas?
Because it's all runoff from the mountains,
yeah.
From higher elevations.
Yeah, so it's right at the source. But once it moves past here, you know, those refineries, those breweries, you know, they take the water, they use it, and then some of it's not as good moving downstream as it was before. Plus we have some farms and things like that in this area where they use fertilizers, and that gets drained into the creeks and stuff. So if you live in Fort Collins, you live in Golden, you live in Denver, pretty much anywhere along the Front Range, we could say, oh, our water's free. But you can't really say that beyond here because pretty much everybody has to drink bottled water. As a matter of fact, I read a statistic that said by the time you drink a cup of water from a casino in Las Vegas, that water has passed through 50 people's bodies.
Dang.
Yeah, at least a molecule here and there has been through 50 different people. So that's insane to me, you know. What else might be free?
I mean, well, I can't say plants because they get sold in.
Yeah, so, you know, you can say dirt,
yeah.
But we kind of talked about soil earlier.
Right.
That, you know, that can be at a very expensive cost to keeping a farm running and things like that. So basically everything has some form of scarcity to it. You know, you could say clear is free, but that's not really good or service. So there are a few things that are free, but they're not something that we want. With that said, a good way to think about this is they've said, really economists and scientists and environmentalists have said that the maximum number of people that the Earth can hold is about 10 billion people. What are we at right now? 7.5, somewhere around there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we still have a ways to go, but with the way that the human population is growing, they're going to reach 10 billion very easily. Now, have you guys ever heard of a third world country?
Yes.
What's a third world country versus the United States?
Some people don't have as much or have access to water as easily as Americans
And goods and services and everything else. They don't have cars and they don't have, they live with the basic needs of food, water, and shelter, right? They don't have all of the things that we have. So here's a funny statistic. They say that a first world human being or an American consumes 30 times more goods and services than a third world human being. 32 times. So when you think China is still considered a third world country, you see everything you see in the news looks like technologically advanced and stuff like that, but there's still a lot of poverty in China, but they're moving up. So is India very quickly. Think about if they gain first world status. Now all of a sudden they're consuming 32 times the amount of goods and services that we consume. That's insane. So how quickly do we run out of resources? How quickly does everything become more scarce? Who gets the last loaf of bread on earth?
First person who grabs it.
Yeah, basically the person that can take it.
Yeah.
Which, when I talked about civilizations collapsing, that was usually the chief or whoever had the military behind him got that last loaf of bread. So things to keep in perspective. So talked about scarcity. The next thing we need to talk about is division of labor. So this is another general principle that you guys will read about in chapter 1. And anybody want to take a guess at what division of labor might mean?
How employees are spread amongst businesses to carry out the duties that are necessary.
So that's very close. So generally what happens is what division of labor is that you have certain employees doing certain tasks in order to complete like products and services.
Gotcha.
So does it make any sense for one person to manufacture a car? If you had to make a car and you had to do it all by yourself, so you had to go in and you had to make the body, you had to make the frame, you had to make the tires, you had to make all the bolts, and then you had to put the whole thing together. Is that a very good use of labor to have one person build one car?
No, it's more like an assembly line thing. Okay, this person puts this part on, this person puts this part on.
Yeah, that's exactly what division of labor is. So you may have one guy that's like, he's just excellent at bolting on the front rear or the front left tire. Okay, he's just excellent at doing that job.
Yeah.
So he's what's called specialized. So you also have specialization. You have people that go to school that naturally, for whatever reason, are specialized in their particular way of doing things. You guys are going to school to become networkers or computer scientists or whatever. You have a specialization. I don't have that specialization. My specialization is in the theory of learning using mobile technology. That's my specialization. So I can do that particular task very well as compared to anybody else. I have that knowledge base. So human beings, what you want to do is you want to find that particular area of specialization, first of all, that you really enjoy doing, and second of all, that you have an innate talent to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, some people are driven by money, saying, I don't care if I like it or not, it pays a lot of money. If that's your motivating factor, that's fine, as long as it takes you to that point of happiness by the time you receive that money. So That's what specialization is. You have people that can do specific things better than other people. We also have, well, I don't want to get off course. Let me see if I'm on the next one. So let me ask you guys this. What is, I gave you an example of the auto industry and division of labor. What's, you guys give me an example of division of labor. Like what's something that gets.
Intel, Microsoft, Amazon.
So what's the division of labor?
So I mean, as far as there are different departments, I would say, in Intel and Microsoft, and you have to employ the people that are that have that specialty.
So what might those jobs be?
You might have a network administrator. You might have a systems administrator. You might have like an IT helpline for people that need help, or for people that need to call in and get help with diagnosing problems and troubleshooting. And okay, my monitor just went black. What did I do wrong, or is it totally like solving the problem?
And then you might have like a project manager.
Yeah.
But then you might also have people that work in human resources to hire those people.
Payroll, human resources.
Payroll, accounting, management, training. You know, so you've got all of these specializations in these areas that people went to school. Luke, can you think of anything else?
For the
Division of labor. Give me an example using a hockey team.
we got the coach, and
You
then
got the
you got
coach.
the star player who you depend on to score the most goals and
Yeah.
and points in general. You have your enforcer who you depend on to intimidate the other team, and the goalie, of course.
Goalie's
to keep
important,
the puck
yeah.
out of that.
Your
So
front
that's-
line, your side line.
That's your division of labor. If you had nothing but, now let's look at, this is strange, but what if you had a team that just had all-stars on it, but they were all, you know, centers?
Yeah.
They were all the best centers, you know, you had whatever it is, 12 of them, but that's all they could do. Would that division of labor help a team win? If nobody knew how to be a goalie.
Well, no, obviously not.
You have to hope that they just,
Yeah.
nobody was on defense. They were just offensively the best centers in the NHL, and they were all on one team. It would probably be a mess, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they'd have a general idea of what they're doing, but their first instinct would be how to play that position. So
Yeah.
it really wouldn't work out too well.
Yeah, it wouldn't work out too well for them.
Because you have your center, and then you have like your left wing and your right wing, like who are you gonna pass it off to, or on the left side, the right side, the goalie, the back, right? Kind of something
Yeah,
like that.
basically all they have is their hockey knowledge, and that's about it. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, well, and where to be in the positions. Because if you put a professional centerman on defense, he's gonna have general idea of what
Yeah.
to do. But
Now, what position did you play?
I played forward mostly, either winger or center. So
What about if you ever had to step in goal? Did that ever happen?
it did once when I was very young. Yeah, our goalies didn't show up, and I was like, I don't know, I'll play goalie for once, and I did pretty decently. I actually remember it was a very fun game because I think when I said goalies didn't show up, I think that meant for both of our teams. So my brother and I just decided, even though we were on the same team, decided that we'd play goalie for each team. So we got to play goalie.
Yeah.
Play goalie. So.
So I have a story about that too, because I coached lacrosse for several years, and I coached it up to about the freshman level in high school. So it's just getting into that competitive level. But I coached for a recreational district, South Suburban, and we would play high schools. So we'd play the big high school in our area that just wins everything is Valor.
Yeah.
And so we had to play Valor. And they have paid coaches that make $60,000 a year. They practice, 8 hours a day every day. And these are freshmen in high school. And our goalie got sick and couldn't play. So one of my star players went into goal, and we were just getting crushed. It was like 12-0. And it was so funny because the guy came down and he finally made a save, took it, and he just started running down the field. And he was just juking everybody, went down and scored on their goalie.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a funny thing that happened with that division of labor in that circumstance.
Yeah.
how that would work out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was probably the most thrilling moment I ever had coaching lacrosse, even though we got blown out of the water. So
That
it's
is
kinda
fun to
neat.
see, though.
yeah, let me ask you guys this: what's a job or a career where it would be bad to have a division of labor? Like what's a unique career where only one person can do something?
Human services, I would say, like the different departments, Department of Revenue, Department of Motor Vehicles, like, I mean, they have various departments, but it wouldn't make sense to have everybody work one department versus, okay, this department handles these type of cases, this department handles these type of cases, and so on and so forth, versus I can throw somebody in there that doesn't know what they're doing and expect them to be productive. It just isn't going to work out.
But they probably have their specializations, right?
Yeah.
So even if you have like a driver's license place,
Mhm.
there's probably some that deal with commercial, some that deal with the general public, some that deal with license plates, some that deal with driver's licenses and things like that. So there is a division of labor. What were you saying?
The first thing that comes to my mind is just like a single person job, like a painter.
Yeah,
music
exactly. An
person.
artist, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're an artist, that wouldn't make sense to have a division of labor. You don't want to share the credit, right?
Yeah.
So anything where you would share the credit would not be a good division of labor. Artist, probably a singer, you know, anything in which it's a unique talent to that person.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't want to have a division of labor. And even then they have agents and they have, you know, managers and things like that that divide up some of the tasks that you would do, but their main output isn't divided in that particular area. Okay, so we talked about specialization and why that's important. The next thing we want to talk about is economies of scale. So this is a unique theory within economics. It's one of the most important driving factors of why you want to have, especially an open economy, and we'll talk about different economies in just a minute. But what economies of scale means is, think about it this way. With each unit produced, each additional unit you produce costs less money to a point. There does become a point when you maximize the units being produced. Can you guys give me an example of what would be a maximization if you were producing units? Let me give you an idea and you guys can come up with a different example. You guys ever watch that show Gold Rush?
Yeah.
You ever seen it? Yeah, where they produce gold. Okay, well, with that, they're always trying to maximize economies of scale. They're always trying to get the most gold with a certain amount of trucks, a certain amount of people, and a certain amount of wash plants to wash the rocks to get the gold off of them. And so there reaches a point, if you ever watch the shows, they're always trying to max out this equipment and then something blows up. That is the maximization of economies of scale. So they may say their economies may be tons of dirt that they can push through their wash plant. So it might be 200 yards of dirt per hour or whatever it is. And if they go to 201, the belt will break. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a point at which you maximized your economies of scale. Why would you want to try and maximize your economies of scale without basically breaking?
You can produce.
You can produce the most amount of goods and services at the lowest cost, which means what?
Save money.
Yeah, and you get the most profit, right?
Right.
Because really in economics, and the book talks about this, but it doesn't want to say what is said, which is human beings basically are driven by profit, okay? Not necessarily economic profit or money, but each individual human being is driven to do better than his fellow human being in some way. You know, we all have a drive, and that's just the natural state of things. It doesn't have to be money, it could be charity. You may be one of those people that's like very philanthropic, you know, being like, hey, I want to do good for society, but I want to do more good than anybody else does. I want to be the greatest human being ever, you know?
That's how
Whatever.
people earn promotions. I mean, people are driven, okay, well, I want to advance in this company and work for a company that allows me an opportunity to move up versus and promote within versus hiring somebody from the outside and having them come in and do a job for the company when there's somebody that's in the company already that can do that job well because they've been there for how many years.
Yeah. Yeah. So we all have an innate, you know, it's just something that internally drives us to do better than our fellow human beings. And again, it's not always has to be about profit. It doesn't have to be about selfishness or anything like that. It's just the fact that somehow it's inborn in everything that we do. Why is that important? Well, let's talk about the different types of economies real quick. So here in the United States, we have what's called a market or open economy. What does that mean? An open economy.
I guess it's just you can kind of work more freely in it, or it's just
Yeah, we have the freedom to go out and do what we want, right?
yeah.
So if you guys want to go start a software company, you can go out and start a software company, and you can charge whatever you want for your goods and services
Right.
that the market will bear. Okay, that people will go out and say, okay, I will pay for their goods and services because they're competitive and it's reasonable. And we're going to get into supply and demand later on, not this week, but
That's
later
fun.
on we'll talk about that. Yeah, well, what's really fun is what shifts the supply and demand curves. But that's what an open economy is. What's a closed economy compared to an open economy?
One that's structured and you have to operate a certain way by certain standards and policies.
Yeah, and who decides that?
The executives and
Government.
the government, yeah.
Yeah, the government says, okay, you will produce this many loaves of bread. You will produce. You will work on this many computers. You will produce this many hours of software. You know, and you have to do that many, and basically that's it. That's what you get paid for. Okay. If you produce one more loaf of bread, you don't make more money. You just produce one more loaf of bread for nothing. Why is that bad?
Then
I shouldn't say bad, but why is that a hindrance?
when you produce more than you can afford.
No, when the government makes you produce only the amount they want you to produce.
Well, then just because you don't have.
And you're only going to get paid to produce, whether you produce 100 or whether you produce one, you're going to get paid the same amount of money.
I mean, yeah, then that allows people to decide whether or not they want to produce 1 or 100.
Yeah,
They can
right.
basically just say, I'm going to produce this many because it's the easiest, and that makes my, paycheck come in no matter
Yeah,
what.
it's the same paycheck, right? It doesn't matter. As long as you hit their minimum level, you don't have to do any more. You're not going to get paid to do any more.
But yeah, salary, employees that are salary versus hourly.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's a good point too. So why would a government, okay, and this is the tricky one, and this goes way beyond this week, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Why would it be a good idea to have government controls on an economy?
Because otherwise, I mean, it's gonna be chaos. I mean, the inflation's gonna skyrocket.
So let's go back to scarcity, right? Let's say that you guys own a lumber company and you live here in the United States, and you're allowed to go out and cut down as many trees as you want, and you're going to get paid you're billionaires because you're going to get paid so much money because you have so much timber, right? Okay, that's an idea of an open economy, a free market, and you guys are just allowed to run wild, okay, and make as much money as you want to. For you, it's great. Again, you're selfish because we know that's part of being economic, right? You're going to do what's best for you today. So you're going to go out there and cut down as many trees and make as much timber as possible. But that doesn't make sense for the rest of the people in the United States, right? Because now we don't have any trees. And so we have no protection from wind. We talked about that. We have no timber. And we have, it messes up the soil. And we have all these problems from not having any trees because you guys cut it all down. So there might be a point where we have government step in and say, okay, we're only going to allow permits for this much. Well, Now let's take it a step further. Let's look at like China, for example. Okay, in China, you've got very limited, you have very scarce resources, but you have a gigantic population. All right, so in China, they have a mix of an open and closed economy, but they also have certain laws, I don't know if they're still enacted, where you can only have so many children. They have a one-child law. And why? It's because their resources are so low in certain areas that if they don't bring the population down, they're going to use up all their resources. They're going to use up everything before, a certain amount of time. So they have a what's called a closed or communist type government for that reason. That's one of the main reasons they do. And so for them, they might operate better in a closed economy. Now, any economist like that's brought up on the U.S. or like Adam Smith, economist, or you'll read about Keynesian economist, is going to say open markets are always going to solve their own problems. But is that true? You're going to have to think about that as you guys read through some of this stuff. What's a scary thing to think about in the future is, when do we get to a point where we can no longer have an open economy at all? When do we get to the point where the government's going to have to step in and allocate? You're going to get this much food, you're going to get this much food, you're going to get this much food. Everybody's basically going to get the same amount because, again, we talked about earlier, first world countries use 32 times as many resources as third world countries. So at what point in time do we try and find a balance to that? Because we know China and India are going to move to first world status. So this is all stuff that can grate on your mind if you think about it too much. So don't give it too much thought. But just remember, that's part of economics. That's part of something you can talk about when you're at a dinner party. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, there is no such thing as a second world country, is there?
So I'm reading a book. If you guys want to remember this guy's name, his name's Jared Diamond, okay? And he writes the most interesting books on why geography helps a country succeed or a civilization succeed, or geography helps it fail. And so he's the one that talks about this 32 times and all these differences. There is no such thing as a second world country. You move from third world to first world. You'd have to read the definitions, but it's a transition because he talks about the transition of all of these Eastern European countries that are moving from third world over to first world. They're gaining first world status on the world stage. Because I was thinking about that when I was driving in today. I was like, what's a second world country?
Yeah,
right.
So,
yeah, I mean, I was curious. I've never heard.
Yeah,
second
I've
world
never
term.
heard
I didn't assume it. Second world existed because I don't even know what to do.
Yeah, there's a chance that there's some reason for that out there. So. Just get caught up here. Okay, so I was playing the 60-minute piece earlier as part of our current events. And again, if you guys want to bring in a video to show or a news piece or something like that, if you see something on television, it's probably going to get reproduced on YouTube. So as long as you remember what it is, we can pull it up here in class. In future days too, we'll play some different things. I don't want to get too much into politics, but politics do play one of the biggest things with the economics, like I said on the 60-minute piece. So the guy that was up there, he's the current head of the Federal Reserve. He's what's considered to be the United States chief economist, and he's probably one of a dozen, or I wouldn't even say a dozen, probably one of half a dozen economists throughout the world that play a big part in what happens with money and what happens with trade and things like that. And he had talked about the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates or decreasing interest rates. When they talk about that in economics, it's something called fiscal policy. So the government has some control over prices. When they increase interest rates, what that means to you and me is that they're increasing the cost that banks borrow money from the federal government. Where does the federal government get their money?
From the taxpayer.
From the taxes,
Oh, yeah.
right, that we pay. We pay tax. And so with that, they get money, and then they can loan that money back out to the banks, which in turn loan that money back to us. So it's a big circular event. You got to kind of, in economics, you got to keep all these things straight. As a matter of fact, this is a circular diagram kind of on how economics works. Because I always wondered for myself, it's like, okay, well, how do the banks get money to lend to us? How does the government get their money? Well, it's all interconnected. It's all circular. So it's like we pay taxes, the government has money, the money loans that to the banks loan it back to us, we go out and buy stuff and we pay more taxes, and it just kind of goes and goes and goes. Well, with that said, the government has also the power, and this is called monetary policy. They have the power to print more money, okay? They can actually make more money than what they took in taxes. But if they do that, what happens? If they loan out more money, if they have money, if they're giving away dollar bills, that there's nothing standing behind those dollar bills. So we haven't given those dollar bills to the government in the form of taxes, but they manufactured them, and now they've given those dollar bills to banks. What's the overall result of that?
The cost of
You're right. I know what you're going to say.
the cost of goods increases.
Increases. It's called inflation, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, you guys have been around for a few years, but one thing that we know here in Colorado that we've seen in the last few years is housing prices have skyrocketed. Okay, that's partly due to inflation, not necessarily monetary policy, but part of it is monetary policy. When you talk to if you ever talk to your grandparents or somebody that was around like 80 years ago, and they talk about hamburgers for 25 cents, and today, you can go to Burger King or whatever, hamburgers $1.50 or whatever it is. That's inflation, okay? Part of that is the dollar getting weakened by the United States giving out more dollars than what it's taking in by taxpayers.
I can't remember if White Castle had other like the mini burgers, and like the cost of those, like they sell 2 or 4 mini burgers, or
Yeah. Now that's a concept we'll get into later, but that's a concept of innovation.
yeah.
So anytime there's innovation in the economy, that's going to shift the supply and demand curve backwards, because we're going to pay less, because generally innovation lowers the cost of something.
Right.
So that's fiscal and monetary policy. So when you play around with the interest rates, you're playing around with the fiscal policy. When you're playing around with the money supply, you're playing around with the monetary policy. Okay. So another determination that we haven't talked about yet is the 2 different types of economic study. So generally, there's what's called microeconomics and there's macroeconomics.
Right.
Microeconomic studies basically a single household or a single business, or it could be a single, neighborhood or a city. Macroeconomics is the bigger part of that. So if it was a business, now all of a sudden when you deal with macroeconomics, you're dealing with an industry. Okay, you're looking at an industry as a whole. Or if you're dealing with macroeconomics, instead of a city, it could be the country or it could be the world that you're dealing with. And that's the macroeconomic term. So you're going to have different shifts. You might have giant shifts in a microeconomic sense that appear very small on a macroeconomic sense, because now you're dealing with a lot more firms, a lot more different things. We were talking about the flooding in Nebraska. Well, let's say that, for whatever reason, we know that Nebraska is a big agricultural state. So they have insurance firms in Nebraska that cater more towards agriculture than urban communities. So let's say that Farmers Insurance and State Farm and these different insurance companies that were more traditionally rural helped insure all of the flood victims in Nebraska. Well, if you're an urban customer of State Farm and Farmers, you're probably going to get charged higher rates because they have to dilute some of those losses among their current policyholders. Okay? The idea of the individual insurance companies, that's microeconomic. But if we looked at the increase in insurance overall throughout the industry, so now all of a sudden you've got Allstate, you've got e-insurance, you've got a lot of these internet insurance providers, which farmers aren't necessarily going to be as comfortable with because they're more like face-to-face and shaking hands and stuff like that. Now, if you look at it in a micro sense or macro sense, you might see a less of a shift in overall insurance rates increasing. So that's an example of how we look at an individual firm like a State Farm or Farmers Insurance, and their rates jump way up. But we look at a macro sense of the overall insurance business, and their rates don't climb quite as high as quickly. So that's kind of a sense on how micro and macro could be related. Okay, so we talked about the closed and the open economy. A fun one to talk about is underground economy. So what's another term for an underground economy?
Black market.
Black market, exactly, right? In what type of situation do you get a black market?
When there are goods and services that can be obtained by normal marketplaces.
Yeah, legal means, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, we're thinking alike over here.
Yeah, so a lot of times you hear black market when it's illegal, right? And the funny thing is, in an open economy, most things are legal, okay? Not everything's legal, but even over time, we've seen like with the marijuana laws and stuff like that, it's been opened up in an open economy. In a closed economy, black market's everywhere, okay? Your regular grocery store, you have black market grocery stores, and then you have regular grocery stores. There's a picture in the book, in the ebook you guys are going to look at, and it's a lady shopping, I think, in an Eastern Bloc country. And there's literally one loaf of bread on the shelves. Everything else is gone. There's nothing else there. It's just one loaf of bread. So where's she going to get her bread from? Black market, right? And what caused that black market? It could be a lot of different things, but chances are it's fixed pricing. So in let's say in a Eastern Bloc country, you've got a government-controlled economy, which states you can only make this much bread and you can only charge this much for bread, okay? So you can only charge 50 cents for bread. Well, everybody's gonna run out and buy bread because it's so cheap. You know, they wanna stock their shelves with bread. They're gonna eat as much bread as they can because they don't know when they're gonna have bread again. So that takes away all the other bread. So then you got a baker, it's like, well, I made extra bread, but they're not going to let me sell it for more than 50 cents. I'm not making any money. We live in a small house. You know, there's 10 of us living in one room. I want to do a little bit better for my family. So he opens his house up to consumers and says, hey, I've got bread. That's $1. You better not tell everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so now he's got a black market situation. That's a situation as Americans we look at and go, that's crazy. But that's how like 90% of the world operates, is through black market sales, okay? You can't buy it through traditional means because regulations have been put in place and there's only limited resources, and the only way for these people to get ahead in life is to sell it illegally, and that's when you have an underground economy. It also, what's another place where you see a lot of underground economy activity?
How many businesses?
Prisons.
Prisons,
Right?
Oh,
Everything's underground economy in a prison. So. Okay, so that's pretty much the review of chapter 1. I'll let you guys work a little bit longer on your regular stuff, and then we'll go over the virtual stock market. That is, you guys will have to register for that. You're going to have a huge leg up on your other classmates, as long as you do well. If you do poorly in the virtual stock market, then they could have a leg up on you. But the fact that you get a a free day of figuring out how to trade some stocks and stuff like that will be a big help. But I'll let you guys spend the next 27 minutes working on your online stuff, or take a break when you guys want. And if you have any questions, if you're going through any of that material, let me know. And then once we're done with the virtual stock market, I'll give you guys your chapter quiz. You two can work on it together through the material. If you have any questions on that, I'll help you with that as well. And then we'll be done for the day. All right.